On May 22nd, 2011, a great wind devastated the city of Joplin, Missouri, killing 161 people and destroying nearly 7,000 homes and apartments in less than 32 minutes. A few days later, I received a call from a friend named George Lombardi, the director of corrections from the state of Missouri. George was familiar with my company's work outside the wire, performing ancient Greek tragedies to help individuals and communities begin to heal from timeless wounds. Over the last couple of years, we performed Euripides Bacchae for people in drug-ravaged towns in Appalachia, Prometheus Bound for the guards in the camps of Guantanamo Bay, and Sophocles Ajax for combat veterans in homeless shelters, on military bases, and at the Pentagon. These ancient plays help people begin to talk about traumatic experiences, and what I've seen in the audiences we perform for night after night is a palpable sense of relief to discover that they are not alone. Not alone in their communities, not alone across the country and the world, and yes, most importantly, not alone across time. Just before writing to me, my friend George had visited Joplin to survey the damage done by the tornado. He wanted to know if I thought there might be a play or a story that one day might be of help to the people of Joplin when they were ready. The book of Job is an ancient Hebrew poem that begins and ends with a tornado and concerns itself with the age-old question of why bad things happen to good people. Job is a righteous and prosperous man who is tested by God when in the course of one day he loses everything: his children, his crops, his livestock, his livelihood, his home, when a great wind annihilates his home. Job sits out in the backyard behind what's left of his house, and he asks God for an explanation, but God doesn't answer. He's visited by a group of friends who come to at first comfort him, but ultimately condemn him. In spite of their accusations, Job clings to his innocence, continuing to question why he's been made to suffer. And in all of his suffering, in all of his questioning, he never gives up his faith, even when his own wife tells him to curse God and die. Finally, God reveals himself to Job from within a whirlwind and rebukes him for attempting to understand what's beyond his grasp. Job, struck silent, falls to his knees and begs forgiveness, and God restores everything that Job had before, doubling his family, his livestock, and his crops. The book of Job asks fundamental questions about what it means to be human. How do we respond when disaster strikes? Why my neighbor and not me? Why me and not my neighbor? Why do we distance ourselves from people who are suffering? How does calamity bring out the best in humanity? And how do we move on with our lives after witnessing death? On May 22nd, 2012, we brought a group of actors to Joplin on the one-year anniversary to perform scenes from the book of Job for nearly 2,000 people in a church and in a high school auditorium. PopTech brought a documentary crew to capture these events. Here's a clip of what they filmed. When Job is visited by this tremendous destruction, he actually sits quietly in his backyard for 7 days with his friends and says nothing, says not a word.
Finally, Job cried out,
God damn the day that I was born and the night that forced me from the womb.
And his friends, who at first were really sympathetic, start to turn, and their compassion starts to fade, and they start to blame him for his own suffering.
"You are lucky that God has scolded you, so take his lesson to heart. For he wounds, but then he binds up. He injures, but then he heals."
How long can I keep on waiting? Why should I stay alive? All my strength has left me. All my hope has been driven away. Can't I tell right from wrong? If I have sinned, wouldn't I know it?
God never betrays the innocent or takes the hand of the wicked. He will yet fill...
What does it mean to feel the kind of survivor's guilt that many people feel when their lives weren't utterly destroyed and the person next to them was? And so Job's neighbors come with those kind of questions. And then ultimately, what does it take to stay in the backyard with Job as he starts to work through the complex emotions he's feeling?
Over the past year, having lost little compared to others, but almost everything in the fact that we lost our normalcy. And in re-listening to the book of Job, I realized, oh my gosh, I said that. I said those words. I said exactly what Job said.
After Job rages against the sky and shakes his fists in the air, God appears to Job, and he doesn't answer his questions, but he appears.
But now my eyes have seen you, and therefore I will be quiet.
And the Lord accepted Job's prayer. Then the Lord returned all of Job's possessions and gave him twice as much as he had before. So the Lord blessed the end of Job's life more than the beginning. Job now...
Well, in some ways, that's an extremely happy result to a terrible, tragic story, but it raises all kinds of questions that I think this community sounds like it's ready to start grappling with. How do you move forward with your life and accept the great riches that come with the rebuilding that's occurring and carry with you the dead? I imagine we won't answer that question tonight, but to acknowledge that it's a question that people might be thinking about, I think is an important and healthy thing to do.
Never would I call the tornado good. It was a tragedy. But out of that tragedy, you being neighbors to each other and taking good care of each other, and you looking after each other. And so I really do think it was our finest hour as a city. And I am very, very appreciative.
We have an abiding faith in the human ability to respond in an empathetic way to suffering. And we've lost touch with what that means as a culture. We've lost touch with what it means to sit in a room together for 2 hours and to empathize with one another and to be together and to breathe together and to listen. We know that that act in and of itself is healing.
Without further ado, we're going to get right down to business with the book of Job. Thank you very much.
Our jobs bring us into contact with something in humanity that on a daily basis restores our faith in humanity.
Once upon a time, in the land of Uz, there was a man named Job. He was a man of perfect integrity who feared God and avoided evil.
So, coming from Brooklyn, we had no idea what to expect on the ground in Joplin. Nothing could have prepared us for what we saw, people we met. The destruction on the ground, even 1 year later, in spite of all the rebuilding, was vast and unimaginable. But the discussions that followed our performances were some of the most powerful and humbling that we had ever witnessed. Here are a few of the things that people of Joplin had to say. These are all quotes. No matter what, when a person openly, honestly pours out their heart and soul, I must listen openly and honestly without prejudice or judgment. I'm a survivor. The Joplin boy in me, the Midwesterner, wants the last word to be, okay, we got hurt, we grieved, we shook our fists at the heavens, we cleaned up, we went back to work, now let's move on. If you tell people they need to move on, maybe it's you who needs them to move on. Although I lost my home to a tree in 2007 and to a tornado in 2011, and have almost lost my life 6 times in the last 6 years to natural events, I didn't think I could relate to Job's story until I heard Paul speak his words. I talked to a lady after the tornado. She said that she wished she had died instead of a friend. I think she was in so much pain. I listened, but I wish I'd known what to say. She definitely had lost hope, and she wanted to curse God, and all I could do was cry, and I prayed. Now I wish I hadn't said anything at all and just held her. Sometimes words aren't helpful. How powerful to see emotion put to the words I've read all these years. I feared this book more than any in the Bible. God has filled my life with the pain and the suffering and the condemnation of Job, but God is leading me to the end of the story where I will be fully restored. The text reminds us of our common humanity across time and generations. It was comforting to see that we're all human. Suffering transcends time. So if that's all the people of Joplin heard, that certainly would have been enough. But we know they heard more and continue to talk about what they've been through for the days and weeks and months that followed in their homes, in their places of work and of worship. And now the hope is that the story of Joplin, our collective story as human beings, will continue with you, radiating out of this room and into the world, so people all over the world who've struggled with these timeless human questions will take comfort in knowing that they too are not alone. Thanks very much.
You're great.